All right, cool. Well, very nice to meet all of you. And as Joy said, I work on the advanced analytics team within Mindshare. And just to start, I think being an analytics professional embedded in an agency, you really have two clients, right? So the first client is always the end client, so Volvo. But you also have to satisfy the needs of your internal clients, the media, the agency, the strategy teams, the planning teams. It's tough because, there's always this stigma of the fox in the hen house type of approach for analytics professionals, where they are sort of apprehensive of doing analytics in-house. Now, from our perspective, there's only one way to solve that problem, which is transparency. And, the topic is revving up the consumer journey through digital channels. And that's because digital is really the big future of what we do, but we can't look at that in silo. We can't look at the website in silo. It's just a part of the consumer journey. And especially with automotive, even though there's some advancements in being able to deliver cars through e-commerce, the end of the journey really stops in the dealership. So we have many different channels that we use to address that. But the key then is, how do we measure? How do we measure all these signals in the marketplace? And how do we come up with a system to basically give our media teams the tools they need to optimize, to understand threshold levels of spending, so there's no waste, or to make sure at least we have enough support, that we make sure we have robust budgets, and also be able to do our day-to-day. But at the end of the day, we have to tie all this back to business objectives for the client, for people like Trevor, where we need to speak in their language, and we can't come into the room with a sort of like a one-sided approach. So I'm sure all of you, if you're on LinkedIn or anywhere, you hear a lot of buzzwords about different analytics tools, neural networks and blockchain and all this stuff.
And AI.
Exactly, AI and all these new innovations. But the key to analytics is really simplicity, right? So, and the reason why simplicity is key is because you need to be able to communicate to someone else in their own language, and not just kind of use an axe to peel an onion, so to speak. You have to kind of take the most simple approach and make sure that it resonates. So that's why there's really four key pillars of analytics. The first pillar is really something, any type of analysis that describes what happened in the past historically. The second pillar is something that explains to you why that happened. But what I want to focus on today is, how we're pushing things forward in the analytics community, especially within the agencies, is focusing on the predictive and the prescriptive part. It's important to know what was my ROI, or which channels contributed to sales. But the real value is telling Volvo, okay, we can, within a certain degree of confidence, tell you that you will sell X amount of cars for 2018. Now, most people will say, how would you do that? Well, we would have to build a model that can account for both media and non-media impacts, and be able to take on new inputs and be able to kind of iterate, because the media plan changes. Anyone who's worked with an agency knows that things change from week to week. Trevor and his team will come in and say, well, there's this new headwind that's happening. We need to adjust. And so we need to be able to say what will happen with all these new changes, right? So
yeah, if there's one constant at Volvo, and I think in many automotive manufacturers, that one constant would be change.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely. And, the challenge, as I mentioned, there's two clients. So, from the business side, we need to be able to communicate to Trevor and his team, this is how it will impact your business. And then for our internal teams, we need to tell them, okay, based on all these different scenarios and plans that you have, these are the different outputs, and you need to be able to change. And then I think the last part is prescriptive. What should I do? That's where our team comes in, really. These are the levers that drive your business. This is how you can push and pull. And the reason why I'm going through this preamble is, we talk about the consumer journey. Any analytics that is, there's many different approaches you can take, but the approach we've taken is to really identify the key signals within the Volvo consumer journey and be able to build analysis to measure media response and also the response of other things against that. So we have a tool within Mindshare called Synapse, and I like to tell people Synapse is not a tool, it's a process, it's a way of thinking. Anyone who works in analytics will you can build a good model, but the best type of model is, one, a model that can forecast, and two, a model that can take on new inputs. So Synapse is an internal-based tool where we can do optimization across media mix, across the different channels that we use, like programmatic or TV or et cetera. And then we can tell you how to change your media mix. So spend more money here versus here. But I think for me, the most important part is, well, before I get into that, we can also talk about flighting. So from a media perspective, Volvo has many different nameplates in their portfolio, and we need to be able to flight media in a way to address those different objectives adequately. So in the past, if we didn't have a model, we would just kind of say, okay, here's our top line media mix, and let's just hope for the best and hope that everything halos down adequately. But with our process, we're able to have a bespoke plan for each nameplate, and also look at how they synergistically work together.
Yeah, and I want to add, that's crucial for Volvo. You know, we are small fish in a very big pond. We're less than 0.5% industry market share. Therefore, we don't have big budgets compared to some of our competitors. So it's really important for us to understand which nameplates to be maximizing our impact on, what's going to have the biggest effect, and which models nameplates are going to halo onto other models of nameplates to get the best bang for our buck, the best ROI.
Absolutely. So the approach that we're using is marketing mix modeling to get these response curves. And as I mentioned before, the consumer journey is important. So we built a bunch of different models, but the main success KPIs that we're looking at are consideration, website visits, and sales. The reason we did that is the media response at the top of the funnel is very different than the one at the bottom of the funnel. You know, as marketing professionals, you hear people talk about the consideration loop or the McKinsey loop and how things have changed over time. In automotive, it still applies, but there's still very much a funnel effect, where you have to bring new out-of-market consumers in, turn them into in-market consumers, and then actually convert to make a sale. So we take all those different models, and we are able to, as I mentioned, optimize towards those different KPIs and be able to say, okay, if I optimize entirely towards consideration, what does that look like in terms of my sales? If I optimize towards driving visits to the website, which is, you know, a big piece of the Volvo go-to-market strategy, how does that affect sales? And we can go back and forth with that. And then at the end of the day, we're able to, as I mentioned, forecast sales and have very good conversations. I would say, you know, we have another Volvo client in the room as well, Ryan, where they all come in the room and we go back and forth, and they bring in new information, and we're able to change the plans and you know, provide results in real time, sitting right there in the room. And that's really the innovative part of this, right? It's not the fancy model. It's not necessarily only the analytical rigor. It's the way we engage multiple teams and engage the client, and we're able to socialize results and create buy-in. Because as well, you know, somewhat connected to the automotive industry, we know that you have to move quickly, right? And you have to also be able to anticipate what your competitors are doing, and then also capitalize on what other competitors are doing in order to create some value for your own business.
Time is money. So the faster we are able to react to different things that are happening in the marketplace, whether it be macroeconomic pressures or competitive pressures, or even our own internal production capacities, or you know, profitability targets, this tool will allow us to make those changes quickly.
Yep. So we start, like, obviously we have the strategy and planning teams who are the art part of the art and science equation, and they're the ones who understand the different channels. They understand the strategy and the business insights in detail, and they come to us with different factors, and then we help them build the plan, and then we feed that into Synapse, and we try out different things. And, you know, one of the things that Mindshare, you know, we kind of pitch a lot to clients is the way we work in a room called the Loop. We pull up different screens where we have, like, cultural triggers, we have, you know, some of competitive spending, we have Volvo sales for the last couple of, you know, and we were able to pull up all these different data points and be able to look at the sales forecast or the risk analysis that we're doing and have a discussion. And it's really an interesting kind of like a system where there's a lot of different people in the room from many different backgrounds, but that is really what it's about, right? In order for you to really build something, you have to engage every single part of the system, and you can't just work in silos. And we've eliminated those silos because we are practicing active listening with our clients. Usually clients will come to us and say, you know, this is our problem, and then what agencies will do is dig into their little bag of pre-packaged tools, and we decided to kind of blow that out of the water and say, we're going to build something that's unique for Volvo.
And it's not just for Volvo, but we have different disciplines in the room from Volvo, whether it be our product team, our creative team, social media, digital marketing. but also cross-discipline for Mindshare as well. They have all of their digital investments and social media people there, and even partner agencies like Gray is our creative agency are there. So everyone's there, and everyone can kind of look at the data together. We have one unified view of the data, and then we can decide together what's the best solution or what does this mean. And then, of course, the team will look at the model, and Synapse is a very important part of what we do in the loop.
Absolutely. So before I pass it on to Trevor to kind of talk through a couple other items, I think, you know, in the context of this talk, I really want to drive the point across, that in order to, you have to kind of structure the way you build analysis and the way you answer questions to fit the industry that you work in. And you can't use a one-size-fits-all type of approach. And another big piece of that is, you know, because I'm speaking from an agency standpoint, usually what happens is a client talks to the agency and they go off and they do a little magic. And sometimes the client can feel like it's a black box. And we've had these conversations internally where, specifically talking about our clients who are in the room, where I'm like, guys, we need to listen to them. They need to be here with us. We need to almost be an extension of them, right? That's really what it's all about. And you'll see that the companies and the brands that are doing that are moving faster and are smarter and better informed about their business. And, you know, we're even telling them stuff about their business, and then they obviously know 10 times more about us about their own business. So there's this back and forth that is really breeds innovation. And the biggest word for me is transparency, so the trust. So we're not hiding anything. We tell them about every single piece of our model. We talk about the assumptions, where obviously no model is perfect, and some of the assumptions we're making. And so that really kind of breeds that.
And I think, you know, one great example there is, in addition to sharing everything and being transparent with the predictions and the expected outcomes and the expected cone of uncertainty, I guess I would call it. It's like tracking a hurricane. You can predict the future, but I don't know where it's going to be in 2 weeks necessarily. Just make sure you're insured, right? But what's really good is we actually have a scorecard, almost a report card, where we actually evaluate on a regular basis okay, this is what we predicted in January, and here was the actual result in March, and we share that back with our executive management team. So I think it's really important that's what helps build confidence and trust. And if we did miss, for whatever reason, we try and understand what data there was or what explanation there was outside of the models that might have explained it. Some, you know, extraordinary event that maybe couldn't be predicted by the model.
Absolutely. So,
okay. So I think what Akechi has really shown is we've really got this really great process with Synapse. And Synapse is a really great visual tool. You can get everybody in a loop room with all these screens everywhere. And that's one of the screens, along with other things that let us monitor the marketing environment. And of course, Synapse is built upon marketing mix model, 3MMM, I like to call it, which is a really great model for looking at, you know, using these advanced analytics techniques like, you know, multivariate linear regression and Bayesian things. We do a lot of time series things. And what that is really designed to do is, in the short term, you know, predict results and be prescriptive and tell us what to do, either for sales or for consideration or for the website, which is what he said. But it's really meant to be more in the short term. We can predict out, you know, with pretty reasonable certainty what our sales will be by nameplate over the course of a year. And of course, that marketing environment's always changing. We're going to shift production from this plant to that plant. That's going to cause these cars to come later or earlier, or demand is greater for a certain car than we expected. And we can adjust all the levers to optimize based on that. But I also want to caution, I guess I would say, is along with your marketing mix modeling, which works really, really well, that's really focused on what you can change in the short term to really make your media most efficient and effective. But over the long term, you also have to have a really good brand equity model in place. And you really have to use the two side by side. What the brand equity model does is it lets you look at the actions you're taking longer term to build up the equity and the value of your brand, which actually has an effect on its sales shorter term over the long run. So I can change something today, and that might sell me more cars in April or May or June. But that action might also diminish my brand equity because I'm not telling that brand story. So it's really important to use the two side by side. And we do have a very robust process with Mindshare for looking at brand equity as well. as well as our own internal Volvo studies. So it's a constant balance of making sure, yes, these are the investments we can make in the media channels across nameplates to really optimize sales and volume, or website visits, or whatever it is that our KPI is we think is going to drive the most return on the investment. But we're also balancing that with, okay, here's things that we can do very quickly to be adaptive, but there's things that we also need to invest in longer term. And of course, that's where your creative and your messaging comes in, where you need to be consistent with your message and how you express the brand over time, so that you can, create the right imagery based on your brand performance, and then have the right opinion, the right decisioning from the customer, which helps build that brand resonance and that brand loyalty, that consideration. That's the ultimate goal. So it's very important to do the two side by side.
And like to add on to that point, we're talking about the, from a digital perspective in the consumer journey. Digital is such a big piece. So, and when you think about the website, that's really a component of the consumer journey where Volvo can control their message. They can really, outside of paid media, that's really one of the places where you can really, when the consumer is coming in, they're coming into an environment that you've created for them and something that that they want. So we want to be able to drive the right people there at the right time, and also not overspend or underspend while doing that. So that's why this process is really important, because we understand that there's a brand story that we need to talk about.
Right.
But we also want to make sure that all the competing objectives or the communication objectives are being satisfied.
Yeah, the brand website, or really all of the owned brand properties, are very, very important, because that really is, in the automotive industry at least, that really is your 24/7 showroom. The dealership can't be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And of course, as our speakers talked about earlier, online sales and online ordering is starting to become more and more popular, where you can just go to the website, or even now with Volvo, download an app and you can order your car right there. So it's getting easier and easier. It's becoming more frictionless for the customer to make a purchase. So the way they can learn more about the brand is to visit the brand website. It's critical. And of course, using your analytics and your tools to measure what that journey looks like for the consumer on the website, to make sure that you're optimizing towards what the consumer is trying to accomplish. One, I think, very important thing when you're looking at data, especially when you're building attribution models for website and for other media channels, is you really have to start with the customer. And I think that's something at Volvo Cars, it's really been in our fabric, our DNA, since we started as a company in 1927. We always start with the customer in mind. Our first sales manual that our founding fathers, Gustav Lawson and Oscar Gabrielsson, said was that cars are driven by people, therefore, comma. And the comma in 1927 was they have to be safe all the time, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But the real insight there is that cars are driven by people. So we have to be people first. We have to understand our consumer, and we have to see our business through the consumer's eyes. So what does the consumer want to accomplish on our website? And I think that's important, is understanding what the consumer's journey is. A lot of times, a lot of brands will measure their website, and they'll measure how many clicks or how many they get through down to the funnel. And they'll say, oh, gee, if we optimize this, or if we change this menu or something, we can make that path a little easier to get to the bottom of what we want as the KPI. But that may not be in line with what the customer wants as the KPI. Mr. Ogilvy, who this place is named after, also once said that advertising is not so much like a sledgehammer, but it's more like a light fog. You don't really change people's perceptions in a very short time. What you do really is you kind of align and resonate with what they already believe, and you show how your brand or your product or your service or your offer, shares values that they can align with. So it's really important to understand what those things are. What information do they want to learn from the website? Is it the pricing? Is it about the car? Is it about the brand story? I don't know much about Volvo because we're so small. We're not on TV a lot. But I think it's very important to understand that and then work with that data to really surprise and delight the customer and give them an experience that they'd like to share with others and repeat.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. I have a question I've been dying to ask.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of anxiety in the industry about personalization, highly specific targets, and what are we doing about brand equity? Are we letting brands slide away? And the methodology you described, market mix modeling, is traditionally thought as a kind of a top-down, more aggregate numbers, and actually it's more focused on if you're brand building as opposed to targeting. What is that why? Because of the Volvo focus on brand, and what are your thoughts about multi-touch attribution, and does it enter into the program in any way?
Sure, I think it's very important. Attribution modeling can really help you be extremely efficient and effective with your media. But I think with all data, you know, when the consumer is concerned, I think it's really important that there's a value exchange. And I think that companies, and the elephant in the room is Facebook, is what's in the news right now with all the controversy. You know, it's important that the customer understands what data they're sharing, and it's also very important to understand what they're going to get in return. In our instance, it's a better advertising experience. It's a more personalized, catered experience on the website, letting them find information that they want more quickly and easily, because now we know what they want. We listen to them. We understand them. Customers aren't necessarily looking for a hole when they go, or a drill when they look into the hardware store. They're looking for a hole. So it's our job to understand what it is they really want, maybe not necessarily what they're asking for. The data helps you do that. And I think it's important for brands to be able to protect customers' data. We at Volvo Cars have announced we're already going to be working with the General Data Protection Directive that's been just going into law in May in the European Union. We're doing that across the United States and across all of our markets. So we're very specific with people what we use their data for. We don't keep any data we don't need for a specific purpose. And we delete things as soon as we're done using it for a limited time. So we respect our customers' data, and again, that's starting with the customer. We have to treat their customer personal data safety, just like we treat them safe when they're in our cars.
Super. Thanks so much. I think we're probably out of time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Great.
Two more great car guys.